Oh, don't pull up in the driveway because Mo got to come back in. Okay.
All right, Lizanne, are you okay for me to start?
I'll give it a little welcome and then turn it right over to you, Jordan. Good evening, everyone. We are glad that you are with us this evening for a training on the community resilience model. And we're glad that you've joined us. And I'm Lizanne Roberts. I am the director of the Coastal Georgia Indicators Coalition, and we are the Family Connection Partnership Collaborative in Chatham County. This information was sent out regionally, and we know that we've got a lot of regional people from different counties. If you would, as we're getting started, put your name, organization, and your county in the chat feature for us as we're getting started. This training is brought to us by DECAL and also by Resilient Georgia. This is a model, and Jordan's going to give us a taste of this evening that will be offered on a regional basis going forward in our region. Every one of the Family Connection partnerships in our region is going to be connected with the community resilience model going forward. And so we want to make sure that we connect you with them. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jordan Murphy, who is going to teach us some wonderful things.
Thanks, Lizanne. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining in on this session today. It's a really quick 1 hour. I do try to put a few experiential exercises throughout the presentation as much as we can in such a short period of time. But throughout the presentation, I invite you to just engage with the content. There's a few opportunities to respond in the chat box. At the end, I'll save a little time for questions. I'll also have a link to an evaluation as well as DECAL CEUs. So I'll put those in the chat box toward the end. So with that, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Can everyone see my screen okay? Yep, okay, perfect. So this presentation is the community resiliency model. It's a quick introduction, and we're putting this content in the context of early care and learning professionals such as yourself, and also those who are involved with any DECAL facilities. So we hope that even after 1 hour, you will have skills, very practical skills that you can take away either for self-care, but also some tips that you can use in your classrooms or in your work environments, or even with your family. These are the objectives. We'll touch lightly on each of these. So we'll talk about stress and trauma, how it does impact mental and physical health. We'll speak about some of the current socio-environmental challenges, how it fits into CRIM's framework. We'll talk about the mechanisms of healing, and that's the 6 wellness skills of CRIM. And we'll be able to explain at least 3 to 4 of the skills with a little bit more depth, but then I will point you to a resource, a free app that you can use to reinforce some of this content. And I have no conflicts of interest to disclose. So the community resiliency model, it's a set of 6 wellness skills. They can be used across the lifespan. So my youngest, and I guess I should have said something about myself, but I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner. So I work with kiddos 0 to 26. And my youngest patient right now that I use the skills with is 12 months. And they seem to work really well for her, but I also use it with older adolescents. I use it with family members when they need some wellness skills. I also use them for myself. This model is being introduced all over the world. Right now, at last count, more than 100 countries, translated into about 20 languages. So you don't have to know how to read to use this model, which is why it works well across the lifespan, but also it works really well in those cultures or those environments where they might not have a word for anxiety or depression. Within this model, we talk about the biology of the nervous system, and we all have a nervous system. So when we talk about it from a biological perspective, we're just focusing in on our common responses, helps to reduce stigma, and also just opens up a different conversation for talking about mental health and wellness. Lastly, this model, I consider it just a daily use model. It's just a set of skills that you can use each day, whether in the morning, evening, afternoon, whenever you need the skills. That's kind of what it's about. It's increasing access to wellness skills for self-care, but also for those clients that we work with. So just to give us a little bit of background, prior, like maybe a long, long time ago, there was this more assumption-based approach to how we interact with people, right? If we see someone doing something bad, we might just say, you know, they're bad, they need to be punished. We may say, you know, what's wrong with you? Why are you acting that way? Or why is your kid acting that way? Within the last really 20 years, there's been this big push toward communities becoming more trauma informed. And that's this awareness that, in fact, people are suffering. We know that adverse childhood experiences, such as trauma or prolonged stress, can impact the way a child's brain develops. It also impacts how well they can learn. And so we're asking different questions like, what happened to you? The third step is really where CRIM comes into play. So CRIM, again, it's very much an action item. It's practical skills. You can use them even after the close of this 1 hour presentation. What we understand is that, in fact, people are resilient. People can learn skills to expand their well-being and reduce suffering. And we're just asking different questions like, what's right about you and what are your strengths? So let's keep this in the context of those early care and learning environments. There are a number of staff, parent, or staff points of interaction. And sometimes those interactions can be challenging. So if we think about pickup and drop off time, I don't know about you, but just kind of depends on the day. Sometimes there's a wonky Wednesday where kids are just maybe a little bit more expressive, right? And having to give them back to their parents or having the parents drop them off, it can mess up the balance of our environment. But that's okay because we can introduce skills that are focused on resiliency. And this is the case for any of those points of contact. Parent conferences, center activities, social services, we can use skills during each of these time points. Also, if, for example, a early care and learning professional is working with a parent and they're also trying to introduce these skills to the child, it gets everyone on the same language, speaking about the biology of the nervous system. So let's just get started with a few questions. What or who uplifts you? What or who gives you strength? What or who helps you get through hard times? I'll just invite everyone to put your responses in the chat box if you'd like. I'll say for me, taking a nice walk when it's sunny out and there's just a little breeze. Family and true friends uplift me. Absolutely. The Lord, God, family, neighbors, community, only God gives me strength. The people I work with inspire me. Early care and learning providers inspire me. My family, God. My husband, my kids, and meditating family, friends, daily devotion to God. My students uplift me. My mom gives me strength. My husband helps me get through hard times. My relationship with God gets me through hard times. And as these responses are coming in, I'm wondering if anyone is noticing those shared experiences, right? We've heard a few that we've repeated, right? So we have these shared experiences of those people, those places, those things that uplift us. I also see hearing the good things that are happening for others, right? So being able to tune into, well, what is getting you through? Maybe I can learn something from you also. Reading my Bible and my family gives me strength, family, and friends. Thank you for sharing. Another question, how do you define resiliency? And then taking it the next step further, what does community resiliency look like for Chatham County, for example, or for the areas or the counties that you all are in? And feel free to put your responses in the chat box. Usually the most common phrase I hear is bouncing back, right? That's probably the most common definition, but what are some other ways that you might define resiliency or community resiliency? Yep, being able to bounce back or bounce. Keep going. Another one is just thriving in spite of everything that's going on. Keeping it moving, keep going, strength in numbers. I like that one. Adapting to change, working together toward common goals. Excellent. Thank you all for sharing. Staying strong, keeping yourself uplifted. Absolutely. Willpower. That's a good one too. So here's the first key concept of the community resiliency model, and it's the resilient zone. It's also called the OK zone, the zone of well-being. Kids call it all sorts of things. They can make up terms, and that's fine. They might say it's my wiggly zone or my squiggly zone, or I work also with adolescents. They call it their swag zone, or whatever common term that they are using now. But essentially, it means it's the place where we feel at our best selves and we feel like we can handle whatever we are experiencing for the day. So not how much can I handle for the week or the month or the year, but just today, how much can I handle? And so the blue lines represent our capacity for the day. So sometimes, and I'll just speak for myself, those blue lines get very narrow if I didn't get enough sleep the night before, if I didn't get enough coffee, if someone said something to me, if I read an email, right? All of those things might narrow my resilience zone. And then there are other times where I'm well rested, I get my breakfast, I'm not rushing in the morning, and I feel like I have a really wide capacity and I can take whatever comes my way. Again, we're talking about the biology of the nervous system. So this red wavy line that you see represents our nervous system and how throughout the day it gives us energy and it takes away energy, gives us energy, takes it away. And this is all facilitated by hormones, mainly cortisol, which is one of our main stress hormones. So in the morning, we get a boost of cortisol. It helps to wake us up. We get dressed, we do whatever we need to do before getting out. And then I don't know about you all, but after lunch, I kind of hit that downswing, right? It's like, now that we're working from home, maybe I'll just take a quick nap, right? Maybe I'll just spend a little bit more time doing something other than work, right? Until I get another boost of energy to help bring me back up for the evening and get whatever task I have remaining. So the goal of the community resiliency model is to introduce wellness skills that can help us to widen our resilience zone so that we can handle more for the day, or we are just feel as though we are in our zone of well-being. The resilience zone is not a happy place. We can actually have lots of emotions when we are still within that blue line, so our capacity. We might be excited, but we might also be angry. I think about this a lot with emails, right? Some emails, they just kind of get you a little fired up, right? They make you a little angry, but if you're within your resilience zone, you might take an extra moment to respond to the email. You may push it away, come back to it later, but you're still functioning within your best self. Other emotions, happy, calm, sad, scared, we can experience a range of emotions and still stay and move within our zone of well-being or our okay zone. But there are those other times where, something happens that can take away that natural balance of our nervous system. This could be one major event. It could also be the accumulation of events over time, right? I think about this a lot with adverse childhood experiences. But something happens, that would be the red lightning bolt, and our balance is thrown off. And we can just describe this simply as stuck in the high zone or stuck in the low zone. Now, when we're stuck in the high zone, there are all sorts of symptoms that we might experience. It could be anxiety, panic, even physical pain. For kiddos, we might see night terrors, day or night accidents, temper tantrums. On the opposite end, which is being stuck in the low zone, there might be experiences of sadness and isolation, fatigue, not wanting to get out of bed. With kiddos, we might see more withdrawn behaviors. They might be a little bit more clingy. When we show this image, it helps to destigmatize what are just common responses within our nervous system. So it's not that we have to point out and say, oh, you have anxiety or you have depression. We can simply say, hey, you might be stuck in the high zone or the low zone. I know some skills and I can talk through them with you, or we can practice them together, and they may help you get back into your resilience zone. So one thing I'll say here too is when we are stuck in the high or the low zone, it's very physically uncomfortable. It's like an experience that it's just like you would do anything to get back into your resilience zone because it's uncomfortable. Again, this helps to normalize a conversation around mental health, but also resiliency. We all have an opportunity to learn more skills so that we can get back into our resilience zone. So here's a just practical classroom tip. We've seen many teachers introduce the resilience zone within their classrooms, and you can draw and make up your own resilience zone, and you can invite kids to place an emoji or a sticker where at the place that they are in their resilience zone. So you may do this in the morning and then have the kiddos check back in toward the evening and tell you if they've moved around in their resilience zone. So if you find that, let's say, again, a wonky Wednesday morning, 5 kids come in and they say that they are in their high zone, well, that might be a good time for the entire class to do a crim skill to help kind of get everyone's nervous system a little bit more balanced, also for the teachers. And so this works really well. You can also put this on your refrigerator if you have young kids at home. So here's another opportunity to just kind of engage in the chat. But when we're stuck in the high zone or the low zone, what are some of those common reactions? So, and feel free to put it in the chat box, but what are common emotional, physical, spiritual, behavioral, relationship, or thinking reactions? Tantrums or shutting down. So kid tantrums, adult tantrums also. Crying. Mhm. Yep, mentally checking out. Lashing out. In the low zone, I often get physically sick or depressed. Negative thoughts of the worst, frustration, misbehaving and crying. Going immediately into my prayer closet. Isolation, the feeling of not being worthy of peace or good things. And there's also those common responses that we tend to stigmatize more, right? Drinking too much, eating too much, or eating too little. For some, self-harm behaviors or using substances. Again, when we show the resilient zone image, we would do anything to get back into our resilient zone because it's so physically uncomfortable. And so we have just a list of common reactions, and they're so common that we can all pick out one or a few things from these lists that we've experienced. And so the goal is not, again, to judge or to increase any shame or stigma around mental health. It's just our nervous system signaling us that we are out of balance and we're trying to do something to get ourselves back in balance. And so again, the wellness skills help us to balance out our nervous system and also decrease shame around, some of our behaviors. Like sometimes I lash out or sometimes I'm irritable. It's just my nervous system, right? I can use some skills when I need them, but I don't always. And so we can always learn new ways to expand our well-being. But let's think about this too. There are other responses connected to our well-being. So my goodness, everyone has shown up tonight. How did you have the strength and the courage to continue to push through the pandemic? It seems as though this community is coming together with a joint purpose. Let's get wellness skills out to as many people as possible. You might have found that you have new gratitude, increased hope or faith. You might find that you're wiser, that you didn't know you could make it through something as difficult as a pandemic, on top of other things that may have been going on. You may also find that a part of you has transformed in a way that is for the better, and you've shared some of your growth with others. And so, I hope and I encourage everyone to just think about those things and those personal characteristics that you have that have kept you going this far and even showing up today, because that's what resiliency is about. So why are we talking about the nervous system and the biology of the nervous system? Well, it's part of that destigmatizing mental health. Many of you, I'm sure, on this call have heard of adverse childhood experiences. So I'll just kind of briefly go over it. But adverse childhood experiences are those things that happen typically before the age of 18 that impact our physical and also our mental health, and also how we respond. So thinking back to some of those common behaviors. So there are things that happen on the first level, which is the household. It could be experiences of physical or emotional neglect or abuse, having a family member who's incarcerated, or experiencing homelessness, substance use in the home, or other mental illness in the home. These things can make the home environment less safe for a child and also impact their learning and also how their brain grows and develops while they are in that environment. There are also things that happen at the community level. So if we think about neighborhood violence, experiences of poverty and intergenerational poverty, lack of economic mobility, so not finding jobs, experiences of racism, historical trauma. All of these things at the community level also impact how children grow and develop and how well they can or cannot learn. And then lastly, there are things that happen at the level of the environment. So the pandemic has gone on for a lot longer, I'm sure, than many of us expected. And if we think about what has happened recently in Kentucky with the tornadoes, these are tornadoes on top of a pandemic, and that can really shape how we show up to work, how we show up for our families, how we show up for school. So with adverse childhood experiences, we do know that these things impact our brain, our development. But a lot of work is also coming out about the other side of the coin, that in fact, and I'm sure many of us can think of a positive childhood experience where maybe someone was just nice to us. Maybe it was a mentor. Maybe it was a friend. Maybe it was a family member, a favorite cousin, a favorite grandmother, someone who helped to buffer our difficult times. It could even be a place. So a place I used to go when I was little, and it was this kind of environment. It gave me a sense of calm or peace, and it buffered all of the stress that I may have been experiencing. So Christine Bethel and her colleagues, they're doing a lot of work in this area to identify what are those positive childhood experiences that help to buffer our stress and any experiences of trauma. And the takeaway is this: when we have the ability to stay calm and in control, even in the face of challenges, we can reduce the impact of adverse childhood experiences. But also important for children, they actually were able to improve their school engagement when they were able to stay calm. But the question is, well, how do you stay calm? How do you stay in control? So again, for this presentation, we introduce practical skills that you can start using immediately and that are also, again, focused on the nervous system. In summary, adversity is not destiny. We've probably all of us have been through something that we found difficult or challenging, but that's not our destiny. We can learn new skills, we can expand well-being, we can thrive, we can bounce back, we can push forward. So as we're moving into thinking about not only the foundation of CRIM, why we're talking about biology, why this model works, and as we are moving into the skills, one thing to consider is that we are focusing on biology and not mental weakness. So again, we've talked about those common reactions, but now we're going to start talking about, well, what do we do about it, right? CRIM helps individuals to read their nervous system. So what that means is I can now identify, am I in my high zone? Am I in my low zone? Am I in my resilient zone? And if I'm stuck on high or stuck on low, I can use some skills. Now, the reason why this works is these two terms, lots to do with science and all the research that has come out, but there's a term called neuroplasticity, which means that our brains can actually change, they can rewire as we learn new things, and this gives us a sense of hope, right? So where I am now is not where I have to stay. I can grow, I can learn things, I can expand my well-being even. There's also neurogenesis, and that just means we can create new neurons. So when we use resiliency-focused wellness skills, we're expanding our well-being. So to keep this content somewhat simple, right, we're talking about the brain, and we use the 3-part hand-brain model, and this is out of Dan Siegel's work. And I'll just invite you to do it with me. And as you do the hand-brain model with me, you can think about also teaching it to the kids that you work with. But right here at the bottom, we have our survival brain. The survival brain is automatic. We don't have to tell the survival brain to keep our heart going or to slow our breathing down. It just does it automatically. We don't tell our food to digest. It happens automatically. This also carries out our fight, flight, or freeze responses. So if there's a threat in our environment, our survival brain just helps us to respond immediately. If we fold our thumb over, this is our limbic area or our emotional brain. This is where we talk about our feelings, our emotions, our attachments to other people. But our emotional brain also helps us to assess risk within our immediate environment. And when we assess a risk, part of that limbic area is our amygdala, which is the fire alarm. When our amygdala assesses risk, it will trigger the lower part of our brain, our survival brain, to respond. So they're very much connected. Lastly, we have our cognitive brain, our thinking brain, and that's the 4 fingers. And if you turn it this way, it kind of looks like a brain a little bit. But our 4 fingers, this is where we do math. It's where we form beliefs, language, thoughts, and speech. But it also keeps all 3 parts of our brain functioning and working together. So when we see a threat in our environment, again, the lower parts of our brain dominate and they kick our thinking brain offline. So we flip our lid. This is where we see those common reactions like, I'm just gonna curse at someone, or I'm just frustrated and I just threw my phone, but I need my phone, right? It's where we have these common behavioral reactions that just happen without us thinking, right? And it makes sense. We're stressed and our thinking brain goes offline because under stress, we don't necessarily need to, well, it would be nice to always be able to think. But in some stressful environments, we don't have time to think. Like if a car is coming, there's no time to think. We just react. The challenge is when our thinking brain is offline more often than we would like. And that's when we can really use some skills to get our thinking brain back online. A little bit further, we have an accelerator and a brake of the nervous system. The accelerator is also called the sympathetic nervous system. It increases our breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, stress hormones. It also decreases digestion, for example. Now, the brake does the exact opposite. This is our parasympathetic, and this helps us to prepare for rest. It helps us digest. It also helps our nervous system recover from stress. So when the accelerator of the nervous system is pressed down for far too long, we start to see some of those physical and mental health outcomes. So you see with the accelerator, our blood pressure goes up, right? Our stress hormones go up. And when the accelerator gets stuck, typically that means we're stuck in our high zone and we need some skills to get us back into our resilience zone. And it's harder to notice and to track within our nervous system when our body is resting, digesting. This might look like muscle relaxation or our heart rate decreasing, our blood pressure decreasing. We notice pain a lot. We don't always sense into well-being and rest and when our nervous system is recovering. So again, part of this model helps us to bring more awareness just by educating ourselves. Hey, is my accelerator stuck or is my brake stuck? If my accelerator or brake is stuck, I need some skills to get me back into my resilience zone. So if we're thinking back to the survival brain, just to go a little bit further, those 3 responses, fight, flight, and freeze. But another response is tend and befriend. So as we're just looking at this image, I'm sure we can all think of a kid or another that we're like, you know what, this kid is definitely a more fight response kid, or this kid is a flight response kid. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a kid pop up from the table and they just run into the bathroom. And you're like, where did you go? Then we have to go find them. Maybe that kid was just having a flight response because of something stressful in his or her environment. I also know a few biters, a few kiddos who will swipe at other kids. And it could be that they're having a fight response as they are experiencing some stress in their nervous system. And then I can also think about my own self and when I have my own fight, flight, or freeze responses. And we'll just take a little bit deeper dive into tend and befriend. It's not a survival response that we spend as much time talking about, but we like to bring it up because just to kind of bring our awareness to this other response. But tend and befriend is referred to in 2 ways, either the protection of offspring, so that would be tending, or kind of joining a social group for mutual defense, and that would be befriending. We can oftentimes see this survival response even in the cases of neglect or abuse. So it's a really difficult situation where a caregiver might not be the best, most loving or kind caregiver for a child, but perhaps they still feed the child every day. perhaps they still pick the child up from school every day. And so the kid will still cling to the caregiver. And again, this is a biological response because it's facilitated by hormones. Oxytocin is released during tend and befriend. Oxytocin is like the love hormone or the bonding hormone, and it helps us to bond to others. But also importantly, it decreases our stress response. So when we are close to each other, when we have those strong relationships, it decreases our stress response, but also it can be a survival response in certain situations. Now, I don't know about you, but there are times when I don't model the best behavior in front of kids, right? Sometimes I just flip my lid and maybe I have a response and a kid looks at me and maybe they copy me. Hopefully they don't. One thing we can do as we understand modeling, right, or observational learning, one thing we can do is when we flip our lid, we can simply just model a different behavior. We can model what it looks like to regulate our emotions and say, you know what, Miss Jordan just flipped her lid and I'm sorry, that probably wasn't the best response, but I'm gonna use a wellness skill and I'm gonna try it right now because I need this wellness skill right now. Would you like to try it with me? Or you can just watch me try this wellness skill. That lets kids know that it's okay to get bumped outside of your resilient zone at times, but there is a way to recover and get back into your resilient zone. So we can model oftentimes behaviors that we're like, please don't copy after me, but we can also model what it looks like to regulate our emotions. So let's dive into the skills. There are 6 CRIM skills. The foundational skill is tracking. It's used with all of the other skills. And if you're not tracking, you're not crimming. During this session, we'll have time to go through tracking, resourcing, grounding. We'll touch slightly on help now, and then I'll point you to the app for gesturing and shift and stay. The first skill is tracking. It's also called reading sensations. So when we think about someone asking us, you know, how's your day, right? Typically we go with a thinking or feeling response. I'm doing fine, I'm doing well. We talk about our emotions. I'm happy, I'm sad. Very rarely do we hear someone say, oh, you know, today my muscles are relaxed, my heart rate is down, my belly feels full. We just don't typically have those kinds of conversations. But with the wellness skills of CRIM, we're actually tapping into that portal of sensation. And again, when we are thinking about our sensations, when we bring awareness to our sensations, we are actually speaking to the survival brain. The language of the nervous system is sensation. So again, if we're not tracking sensations, we're not crimming. The reason why this works is because every emotion has a physical sensation in the body connected to it. So about 700 individuals were shown images of emotional content like anger, love, depression, pride, shame. They were then asked to draw on a body map where they noticed increased nervous system activation or decreased activation. So the red and the yellow represents increased activation, or you can think about this as the accelerator on the nervous system. And then the blue represents decreased. You can think about this as the brake on the nervous system, and the black is neutral or no change. And so what these images show is that there are some common physical sensations associated with an emotion like anger, right? Maybe I ball up my fists, they feel really warm, or I notice my cheeks getting warm or my ears getting warm when I'm angry. Or maybe when I'm feeling very proud of a family member that has accomplished something, I notice it in my chest, right? I feel a nice warm sensation in my chest. So we acknowledge emotions and feelings, of course, but we can also tap into those physical sensations that correspond to emotions. So tracking is noticing or paying attention to what's happening inside your body at the present moment. We then determine if the sensation is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. but we only want to track and stick with the sensations that are pleasant or neutral because we don't want to overwhelm our nervous system. The way that we track or the way that we ask the question, we might say, what do you notice on the inside? And are the sensations pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? There are 3 ways to track. We can do this by observation. So it might be that you're sitting in front of a kid and all of a sudden they kind of just slump over, right? Or maybe their breathing changes and it looks like they're breathing really hard, or their color changes. That's observation. So we are able to track when someone's nervous system might be moving toward the high zone or the low zone, and then we can offer a skill if needed. We can also check our own internal climate when we are talking to another person. So sometimes when I'm having difficult conversations, maybe with a parent or a coworker, for example, I notice some sensations coming up in my own nervous system. Maybe my heart starts to race, or I feel a little tingling sensation in my belly, for example, or maybe my muscles get tense. I would then know that right now I should use a skill to help balance my nervous system while I have this difficult conversation. And then lastly, there's person self-report. So we can just ask someone, what do you notice happening on the inside? Are the sensations pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? So here's just a menu item of words. So different from the emotion-based words, but I won't read them all off, but just as you learn to build the language of sensation, just consider these. So we'll do a really quick exercise and I'll invite everyone to do it with me. But if you could just rub your hands together really quickly. Please, and then pull them apart. What are you sensing? Feel free to describe it in the chat. I felt like a burst of energy, warmth. I kind of felt it in my shoulders a little bit from all the moving. What other sensations did you all notice? Did anyone notice like a tingling, a little friction? Yep, tingling when I pulled away, that might be like a vibration. More tingling. Did anyone notice their hands cooling down after? We hear that a lot also, warmth and tingling. So that's the first skill of tracking. So that's just an easy way to learn about tracking, but also teach kids, right? You can do that quick exercise to get them to develop the language of sensation. The second skill is resourcing. So the best way to learn about tracking is through another skill like resourcing. So what might be pleasant for these 2 kids in the photo, thinking about some of those sensory experiences, and feel free to put it in the chat. Maybe the water, yep, the coolness of the water. Maybe the different textures, so the stone versus the water versus the grass, their reflection in the water, their reflection, the water. They're probably at some point gonna splash it around and I'm sure they'll enjoy that as well. The water. Maybe even the texture difference between the leather hat versus the blue jean hat. Usually when I show this picture, someone always points out the Crocs. I'm sure they have their own sensory experience connected to them. I don't wear Crocs, but I think they might have something there. Cool water. Maybe even the sunny day. Right? So as we are introducing tracking and resourcing to kiddos, with some of these sensory activities that you all are probably already doing, you can invite them to track their nervous system by asking them about those sensory details. So a resource is just any person, place, thing, something that gives you a sense of calm, peace, or makes you feel resilient. A resource can be real or imagined. I've met so many Black Panthers and Superman and Moanas. So people and kids, they make up all sorts of things, and it's their resource. A resource can also be internal or external. So it could be that I work really hard, or I'm ambitious, or I enjoy spending time with family. I have a sense of humor. So a resource is internal or it's external, like a vacation, for example. We do want to acknowledge that, even before the pandemic, children have experienced the loss of a caregiver, but since the pandemic, more than 100,000 children have lost a caregiver. And so when we talk about resourcing, if we ask a kid what their resource is, they may say, well, it's my mom, but my mom is no longer here. Within this model, we can be very sensitive to a person's resource or a child's resource, and we just invite them to notice if any sensations come up for them. But we also can ask them resiliency-focused questions like, if your mom were here right now, what would she say to you? How would she respond? What was your favorite thing to do with her? If developing this resource is too difficult and tracking the nervous system with the loss of a loved one is too difficult, we always invite the person or the child to come up and develop another resource until it becomes easier to come back to that resource. So we just like to mention that. The third skill is grounding, and grounding is the direct contact of the body or part of the body with something that provides support in the present moment. So when our relationship to the earth is safe, if I feel grounded, I can feel my feet on the ground, then I feel safe. And also it's easier to develop relationships and to feel safe in relationships. When we're grounded, we're not worried about the past or anxious about the future. We can just notice into points of contact of our body. So maybe the chair that you're sitting on, maybe the desk, any sensory experiences that are in your surroundings, and then tracking those pleasant or neutral sensations. So again, using the skill of tracking with grounding. So how do we ground? Many different ways. We can walk and pay attention to steps. We can stand against a wall. We can sit on our favorite chair or a love seat. We can float in water if anyone prefers to take a bath and just kind of notice that as a grounding experience. So pretty much through any point of contact with our body. All right, going to the last skill that we'll cover for this session is help now, sometimes called reset now, but it can be considered emotional CPR. So what do we do when we are really bumped outside of our zone? Well, there's a list of 10 skills, and this is not a complete list, it's just a short list really. But each of these skills in one way or another can help to reset the balance of the nervous system, even for just a few minutes. So if we think about the process of drinking a cool glass of water, when we drink a cool glass of water and we track our nervous system, so how the water, the sensation of the water going down our throat, is it cold, is it warm, is it hot? Do we sense it in our chest? Do we sense it in our belly? What that does is it gives our nervous system just a moment of a break, right? So if we think about the accelerator and the brake, drinking a cool glass of water can kick on the brake of our nervous system and help us to rest and recover from stress. There's other ways. We can listen to sounds, we can go for a walk, we can touch the furniture, we can listen to the birds chirping, we can count backwards. I encourage you all, if you're interested, you can order a poster from the Trauma Resource Institute. It has these skills. You can put them up in your classroom. We're using them at the classroom that I go to. And the kids actually are really responsive to it. If you have teenagers and you want to put it up as a poster in their wall, might be helpful also. So what's next? You've been introduced to the skills. Again, tracking is used with all of the other skills. I would encourage you to start tracking your nervous system. Notice those sensations of well-being. When are your muscles relaxed? When is your breathing steady? And sense into those pleasant or neutral sensations for about 10 to 15 seconds to help expand well-being in your body and in your nervous system. There wasn't enough time to go through gesturing and shift and stay, but there is a free app. It can be found on the iPhone App Store, Android, but also online, going to itoapp.com. This app will reinforce these skills, and you can also feel free to share the app with others if you want to give them the opportunity to learn these skills. When it comes to wellness skills, we always suggest putting on our resiliency mask first. When we learn the skills for ourselves, we're just better able to help others. And so the more that I've been teaching this model now for about 6 years, the more I do it, the more I feel like I understand the skills and when to use whichever skill. I think grounding was the last skill I kind of started using. So not every skill works for everyone immediately, but with some practice and intention, it can be really, really helpful. So we have some research that supports that after even 1 hour, you all can be considered CRIM guides. What that means is you've been introduced to the skills, you can download the app to practice the skills, and you can also introduce them to others. But you can even ask those resiliency focused questions. What is your resource? And then where do you notice any pleasant or neutral sensations in your nervous system right here at the present moment? As a CRIM guide, we don't interpret or assume meaning. We ask open-ended questions. We allow the person time for them to identify sensations. We stay one step behind. We don't judge anyone's resource. And we just are sharing the wellness skills with anyone who might be interested. Currently, I'm on site twice a week at Atlanta Children's Shelter in Metro Atlanta. And we've introduced CRIM to the staff and administrators, the teachers. They have the posters up in their wall. And where I come in is for those kids that still need that individual one-on-one support. And I just work with them reinforcing CRIM, but also linking them to additional services whenever needed. As much as we can, we try to introduce these skills to parents as well, so that we can all speak the same language. So, during pickup or drop off time, if I'm talking to a parent, I might say, your kid just had a fight response today. We used a help now skill. He was able to get back into his resilient zone. You may want to try this skill with him at home. I think he likes it, and it may help to balance his nervous system when he's stressed. So again, it helps to reduce any shame around behaviors. If anyone is interested in the evidence that supports this model, there's lots of work coming out. The most recent one that I will highlight is a study that myself and colleagues did with hospital workers during the COVID pandemic. So last fall until this past summer, we just did a 1 hour introduction for nurses, doctors, janitors, administrators, anyone who would listen. And what we found is even after 1 hour, healthcare workers improved their well-being, reduced secondary traumatic stress, reduced their physical symptoms like headache, stomach ache, but also improved their work engagement. So these skills, we always encourage everyone to share them with others. So that was my presentation for tonight. Again, thank you all for joining in and listening in. If you find that you have more questions, you're interested in, where do I take this? How do I implement this? You can always feel free to shoot me an email, reach out. If you are completely sold, even now, and you are thinking about becoming a certified CRIM teacher so that you can deliver workshops right within your own communities, I invite you to go to the Trauma Resource Institute and look up how you can become certified as a CRIM teacher. So with that, we have a few minutes, and I will give a few minutes for questions, and I will also put the link to the evaluation and the CEUs in the chat box in just 1 second.
Thank you, Jordan. While people are formulating their questions, I have one that I would love for you to talk a little bit about. You mentioned that you use some resiliency skills with a very young child. So without saying names or anything, could you say what you used and tell us a story about that?
Absolutely. So my youngest patient right now, she's 12 months, and it is time for her to transition from the infant room to the toddler 1 room. And she's having a really difficult time. She's very clingy, very distressed, cries, gets very, very anxious. So I consider her to be more of a high zone kid. And what I do is I track her nervous system. So there are times where we're trying to transition her to the next classroom. She's really overwhelmed. And I say, you know what, right now isn't the best time. Let's try to do really close touch, because that's what her preference is. There are times where we will use sounds. So she likes sounds from toys, like toys that you can press and make lots of sounds. Other kids don't like sounds. So as I'm tracking another kid's nervous system, for one kid, I might use sound, for another, I might only use touch. And so as we are transitioning her, I'm closely monitoring her nervous system. She can't tell me, right? She has no words to tell me, I'm overwhelmed, I'm stuck on high, I'm stuck on low. But as I've learned these skills, I track her, and then we can make up a plan and decide when is it best to fully transition her to the next room. That was a great question. Thank you. Any other questions?
Any other questions for Jordan? I do want to say to everyone that's on here, we're just completing a grant that if we get funded, we will be offering opportunities within our community for people to become CRIM trained. This will also be a regional offer. So if you have interest in becoming a CRIM trainer, I hope you'll reach out to me and let me know who you are. And we can work on how we get to that place. So once we find out what the funding stream looks like, we're going to be looking for people who really want to help us become a trauma responsive region and a resilient region. So we hope that you'll join us in that endeavor. With that, I do want to just point to the CEU information that Jordan put into the chat feature, and also the evaluation form. The evaluation helps us track the information and what might be useful to you. One of the questions that we're really interested in is what you might have learned tonight that you'll be able to use tonight or tomorrow or in your classroom. So we hope that you'll complete the evaluation form as well. Folks that complete the form, we're also going to be giving away a $100 gift certificate to someone. So if we contact you and you get an email from coordinator at cg.cgic or director.cgic, please know that that's one of us, and that we'll get back in touch with you and get your mailing address so that we can mail that, because we're doing a drawing for people who attended last night or tonight. So any other comments or questions? And those of you who are on, have your cameras on, or those of you who don't, I want you to go over to the reactions button down at the bottom, and let's give Jordan some applause for tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
One of my favorite things to do with people who are on camera is this is the way hearing impaired people clap. Mm-hmm. So those of you who are on, give Jordan some love.
Thank you all. I appreciate it. And I just, I want to respond to that one point in the chat, how drop off can be a struggle. I would just encourage you to use the app to learn about tracking so that you can learn how to track his nervous system. And there are windows of time or windows of opportunity when dropping a kid off and walking away might be a little bit better and overwhelm their nervous system a little less. So I would, or even sharing a resource with the kid, like having a shared resource with your child, and using that as a drop-off conversation can also be beneficial. So thank you for mentioning that.
Any other questions before we close?
Ms. Roberts, do you want us just to email you if we're interested in the CRM training?
Yes, and I'll put my, let me put my email address in the chat. There we go. That's how you can find me. And again, Jordan, thank you very much. And I want to thank all of you who joined us tonight, because I know it's a long day, and you came, and I'm grateful. So thank you all, and I wish all of you the merriest of holidays. I hope you stay safe and well.
Thank you all. Good night. And I see one question. When is the 3-hour, Lizanne?
So we're going to be offering the 3-hour after the first of the year. We're already starting to meet on our next moves. So stay tuned. We've got everybody's email addresses. So when we send out information, we'll send it out to everyone who joined us. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.